Hi, welcome to another episode of Homestead Healthy. We're Bob
and Beth.
Today we're going to be starting our series on fermentation and kombucha. We both love kombucha and it's easy to make, but a lot of it starts out with a SCOBY. What is a SCOBY? The symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. What is that? Well, it's what we make in order to get the fermentation process going in the production of kombucha. Fermentation is the chemical process in which the carbohydrates act like, or carbohydrates like sugar or starch turn into alcohol or acid. Simple enough. It's a typical cellulose type structure, and it's very, very simple to make. Now, when you do make it, you do need to go out and stop in the store and buy one of those bottles of kombucha, just because it has that SCOBY, or that mother, as a lot of people refer to it as, already kind of started. If you look at the bottom of any of those bottles, you'll see kind of an ugly little mass down there. That's the SCOBY actually started. So it says to try and get raw kombucha, raw unflavored kombucha. Well, you just don't find unflavored kombucha these days as much as you can in health stores because people like the flavor. So I opted to start with a very mild flavored kombucha, and it's a ginger and kiwi flavor one. I used that for the mother to start my process. I would not recommend using the heavy flavored berries, different things, because it's a little too overburdening, and I don't know how much of that flavor would carry over. But a ginger is nice, it's mellow, and as I found out, it had absolutely no effect on the taste of the future kombuchas that we made with this. Now, if any of you have ever made sourdough bread or ginger beer, anything that requires the fermentation process, even apple cider vinegar, you'll hear referred to as having a mother in it. You'll see that SCOBY, in essence, that you use to get all that fermentation process started. They all require a simpler or a very similar type of symbiotic culture. Of course, you can go out and buy it, but before you buy it, why not just make it? It's inexpensive. It's a heck of a lot cheaper than going on one of those mail sites and ordering it. And you'll have enough to get your neighbors started, friends, who knows? Pretty soon the whole neighborhood can be making your own kombucha. Okay, so let's start making our own SCOBY. Let's bring 4 cups of water to boil on the stovetop. Go ahead and turn that off once it's boiling well, and remove it from the heat. At this point, go ahead, add a 1/4 cup of sugar. When you make kombucha, you'll see we add a lot more sugar because we're making sweet tea. This, we're just trying to get the fermentation process started. We're just putting in enough sugar for the yeast to start feeding on. Make sure that dissolves in nicely. And then I use 6 bags of the strongest black tea I can find. Usually it actually turns out to be the cheapest tea you can find, and it's black tea labeled, and it's in Walmart, grocery stores, all over the place, but you don't have to spend a lot. And I let it sit. Now this one, I let it sit overnight, and then in the morning it was cool enough I could add it to the 1-gallon jar without a problem. So what we need to make our own SCOBY is very simple. Some water, a clean jar, some black tea, some sugar. You need to go out and get 1 little bottle of kombucha that's already sold in the stores, and a coffee filter just to cover the top of the jar so the fermentation process can take place. Very simple ingredients. And after you've added it to your container, your 1-gallon container, or whatever size container you're using, then add your 1 bottle of kombucha to it and let it sit. I put a cover on it. I set it away in a dark spot somewhere underneath the cabinets, and I leave it. 3 weeks later, I come back, I check it, and I see what we've got. And as you see, I've got a SCOBY. This one's pretty healthy. It's a lot bigger than most of the time for that short amount of time. It's a good 1/2 inch or more thick. You see, it's very cellulose based. And it's ready pretty much to cut up. There's enough there to share with everybody in the neighborhood. It's a very, very healthy SCOBY. So I went ahead, I was getting ready to clean it up, and my daughter called and said she had some friends that wanted some. So I put it back, and left it for another 4 or 5 days. You've got your tea mix. Everything's growing well in it. It's very happy. The SCOBY's nice and clean. It's got a sweet vinegary smell to it. It's nothing strong. Set it back in, and guess what? It's going to just keep on growing. And it's going to start growing one on the top too. Sometimes they'll float on the top. Sometimes they'll float down. Doesn't matter. I went ahead. I covered this one back up. Left it till my daughter came over. And there it is, a SCOBY Hotel. Now every time you make kombucha, you'll get a new little SCOBY on top. You can go right in there with the others, and you've always got plenty on hand. Now when my daughter did show up, I pulled it out of the cabinet, and I noticed a light film up on top, as you can see. Well, a new SCOBY already started to form. So I was going to treat her friends. I said, well, I'll cut some of the old SCOBY, and I'll give them the new one. You can see it's in its infant stage, but it's still holding together perfectly. It's very thin, but it'll grow into a nice healthy SCOBY, and it can be used for any kombuchas that you want. So I took that, and I took the regular SCOBY out. You really don't need much. I went ahead and gave them a big piece. There's probably enough in that one for a couple of people also to get at least the first batch of kombucha started. But heck, they're so easy to grow, and it's going to be so plentiful, and there'll be another SCOBY growing on top of that jar in the next few days. Figure what the heck. So once you're done, back into the jar. And again, I can't emphasize enough, clean hands. Again, you're dealing with yeast and bacteria, and they don't like outside agents to kill them off. The last thing you want is mold or anything foul smelling. And if you start to smell something bad or foul in that jar, it's no good. Let's get rid of it and just start over again. But you know, in all the time I've been making these, I've never had that happen. Because again, just keeping track of, keeping everything clean. Now when you do give away a SCOBY to a friend or two, as we're doing here, you always want to include about a cup of the mother juice, I call it, inside the bag you're presenting to them. Because when you start your kombucha, you're going to pour into your batch, and that takes the place of buying that bottle jar like I did the first time. And there's enough in there now to get your kombucha started and start your first fermentation. Well, that's pretty much the down and dirty on making your own SCOBY. Now you can see it's not a hard process. It takes not even 3 weeks. You've got something healthy growing, you're ready to make your own. This is going to bring us into part 2 coming up soon, which is your first fermentation of actually making the kombucha. You'll see it's very simple, and we're using everything we've made right here in the kitchen at the Homestead. So, get your tea bags, get your sugar, get your filtered water ready, and get ready to watch for the next episode when we start doing our first fermentation. Kombucha takes 2 fermentations, and we'll make sure we bring you through both. So, from Homestead Healthy and this episode, this is Bob
and Beth,
and we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please consider going ahead and giving us that thumbs up, and also subscribing so that you can catch all of these videos. We will catch you next time. Thank you again for watching us today. Take care, God bless, and we'll see you again on Homestead Healthy.